Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Convention of States, Indiana Live. Let me ask you a question. Do you think we still have a big problem with our federal government in Washington, D.C.? Well, if you do, stay tuned because we at Convention of States have a solution as big as the problem. Once again, good evening, everyone. My name is Dale Parrish. I am the state director for Convention of States here in Indiana, and I want to welcome you to our broadcast this evening. Our broadcast will be in three different segments. The first segment will be a discussion period, and we're going to have, as our guest this evening, we're going to have a lady by the name of Melba Kiser. Melba is one of our district captains, and Melba is going to be talking about term limits tonight. So a topic that is always very interesting to talk about. All right. And I might mention one of the main items that Convention of States would like to see an amendment or amendments created that would address term limits in our federal government. But we'll say that for when Melba comes on. Our second segment will be a short presentation to give you some information about Convention of States here in Indiana and how we're doing. I'll give you some general information and some numbers. And then the third segment will be devoted to what we call the basics of Convention of States. These are the tenets that we all believe in and go by here in Convention of States, not only in Indiana, but nationally. Now, before we get any further, I want to do my warning like I normally do. In the event that your screen would go blank or you lose us, or it freezes up, I guess is what I was trying to say. Just consider that we've encountered a technical problem. This has happened in the past, probably going to happen again sometime or another. But like I said, it's a technical problem. There's nothing we can do about it. So I don't want you to wait around thinking that we're going to come right back on because it just doesn't work that way. It takes us too long to get everything back up and going. So if that happens, please just put us on your calendar to join us again next Monday evening, and just don't wait for us to come back on if in fact we encounter a technical problem. Without further ado, then I would like to get into our first segment and bring Melba on. So I'm going to give her the hi sign and bring her on. Hi, Melba.
Oh, hi, Dale. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, I think the very first thing that we probably ought to address is why your name on the screen doesn't say Melba Kiser. It says Lydia Gonzalez.
And that is also me. Kiser is my married name. My maiden name is Gonzalez. My middle name is Lydia. So when I started the Facebook page that I wanted to basically follow specific groups interested in government and self-governance, I decided to set up a separate Facebook page for that, and I named it Lydia Gonzalez.
Okay, all right.
Still
all
need.
right. Well, we'll get that out. We got that out of the way, okay? All right. Well, as I mentioned in the introduction, your topic this evening that you wanted to talk about and lead a discussion on is term limits. So I know, like I said, this is a topic that many of us are interested in. So where do you want to start? You want to start back at the founding?
I think so. I think people would like some background. So basically, in the United States, term limits actually date back to the American Revolution. But term limits actually started back thousands of years ago in democracies and republics of antiquity. The way that defined term limits was really more what they called a run of office. And the whole idea behind the run of offices was to bring the most experienced politicians to power, so that they would have the experience to lead the people forward. Now, as far as the United States itself, there were term limits that were set forth in the Articles of Confederation, which were adopted in 1781. And that was for the Continental Congress, which is the equivalent of Congress in today's terms. Okay. So those go back quite a ways.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, there's a lot of different areas to start with here. You want to start with and you're going to talk about the Supreme Court, I know here. And a lot of people, when I talk to them about term limits and I mention the Supreme Court, it's really, you want Supreme Court to be under term limits? And yes, we do. So you want to address Supreme Court then?
I will be happy to, but before that, and I apologize, Dale, I'd just like to go back because there was a lot of discussion with our founding fathers as to whether they should put term limits in the Constitution or not.
Okay.
So we had some founding fathers that were for having term limits in the Constitution. Among them were Thomas Jefferson and Richard Henry Lee, and one that people who follow Convention of States would be familiar with, and that is George Mason, the very founding father who gave us the means of having a Convention of the States. But of course, there were also founding fathers that were against setting term limits. And one of them was James Madison. And I would like to read a quote from James Madison. He said, "A few of the members of Congress will possess superior talents, will by frequent re-election become members of long standing, will be thoroughly masters of the public business, and perhaps not unwilling to avail themselves of these advantages." So that is what he had to say about it. Now, our founding fathers, of course, set forward the three branches of government, one of them being the judicial branch. So the Supreme Court was actually established in 1789. Back then and now, Supreme Court justices are appointed for life or until they retire. So that was supposed to be, the judicial system was supposed to be part of the basis of checks and balances. So the average, I look back at some data to see how the Supreme Court justice has changed or how it has evolved since its inception in 1789. So I went back and I looked at who were the Supreme Court justices in the 1790s. And their average tenure was 8.5 years. So at that time, they saw it as they served and they retired.
Right.
Well, by the 1890s, or a century later, the average tenure was 18.25 years.
Okay.
And once we got into the justices between 1971 and 2006, the average tenure was 26.1 years, which of course drastically reduces their whole idea of checks and balances because they've become somewhat partisan. If you look at the period, then if I looked at those that are serving basically after Antonin Scalia, the average tenure now is 26.33 years and counting, because we have many Supreme Court justices, the 7 out of the 9 really, that have been serving for quite a while and don't look like they're ready to step down and let someone else take their place.
Right, right.
Now,
Okay.
what a lot of people don't often think about, a lot of people concentrate on the Supreme Court, but we know that our president is nominating a lot of people to fill federal judge positions. And so there are 179 judges in the Federal Court of Appeals, and those are divided among 13 different circuit courts. The issue with that is similar to the issue with the Supreme Court. We have 42 of those 179 that are 70 years of age and older. And 70 seems very young, but then we have the example of if someone was nominated and put through the process and confirmed when they were in their 40s or 50s, they could be there for a very long time. And such is an example of that is Judge Gerald B. Joflat. He has been serving for 41.6 years, basically since the period of time that he was elected or confirmed, which was in 1975.
Wow. 41 years, huh?
41 years, yes.
My gosh. Okay, let's move on then.
Mm-hmm.
Where you want to go next to? President?
Yeah, I believe so, because that's a very interesting one. We actually did not have any term limits for presidents because for the first 150 years, our presidents followed the precedent that George Washington set, which was to serve 2 terms. So we actually didn't run into an issue until we got to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who served 4 terms or was elected to 4 terms. So it was only 82 days after his 4th inauguration that the Republican-controlled Congress proposed an amendment to the Constitution to restrict the presidency to 2 terms.
Right.
And that was sent back to the states, and it was ratified 4 years later in 1951. So since then, we have had the presidents who can only serve 2 terms, and it's official, and we're not just relying on what George Washington did. Now, vice presidents have no term limits set on them, but traditionally, vice presidents have only served 2 terms. In other words, they have followed their president.
Right.
In their years of service.
All right. Well, then, okay, let's get into Congress now. Here, this is a big one.
It is going to be a long one, and I have a lot to say about that.
Okay.
So the amount of years of service for the members of the Senate and the House of Representatives has changed substantially since the 3 branches were set up in 1789. Beginning in the late 19th and through the mid 20th century, those numbers of service have steadily increased. But it was really after the direct primary system, the 17th Amendment, and the Reform Act of 1978, that the idea of incumbency came into being. And after World War II, what we would call an office holder class is really developed that came to be pretty much the same way the Supreme Court was functioning, where these folks just keep running and running and running. In the past, I'm old enough to remember this, Senator. We have had politicians serving that really had no business serving. And the one specifically that comes to mind is Strom Thurmond. He served as a senator for 47 years. You're shaking your head like, yeah, I remember. Until 2003, the year that he died. And at that time, he was so frail that he was under sedation and needed assistance getting up from his chair.
I did not realize that he had served, you said 47 years?
47 years.
I
Until
didn't realize he served that long.
Yeah.
But I do remember him, yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Unfortunately, we still have members that are following on that path. So for example, on the 116th Congress, which is the current one, the longest serving representative with approximately 46 years is Don Young. And in the Senate, the longest serving senator is Patrick Leahy with 44 years of service.
Wow.
Right. So,
well,
yeah.
Okay, I know you wanted to touch, and this is interesting because I've never heard about this. We don't talk much about this, and this is the congressional staffs.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm anxious to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, basically, I had wanted to talk about the next thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that even now, when people and when Americans are so profoundly disappointed and disillusioned and disgusted with our Congress, the re-election rates are approximately 90%. And even in what they call wave elections, more than 80% of the members are re-elected. So the way that we can see this impact is that there's data that would basically correlate that the longer that the members are re-elected, the longer that they sit and serve, the more money that they spend in Congress. So that goes into why the budget is the way it is. But we also know that the likelihood that our members of Congress are going to vote themselves out of office is practically zero.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, you want to go to the states now?
Actually, I wanted to talk about some of the pros and cons of, some people will say like we need to set term limits in Congress and others are against it.
Okay.
And one of the main issues that people bring up is, well, if we put term limits in effect for our Congress people, then the staffers will take over. And in fact, the staffers usually serve almost as long as the Congress folks do. But some of the stats, as you mentioned, that I have is in 1891, or basically 100 years into our Constitution, we had 146 congressional staffers. Just 50 years later, in 1943, that number had grown to 304. So it had doubled. But wait, I'm glad you're sitting.
I know what you're going to say here. Go ahead.
Yeah, by 2000, that number was 7,890.
Wow.
Or 25 times as much as what we started with 100 years into our government. What's even more upsetting and what I found really shocking was that the maximum salary that's allowed for these staffers for House of Representatives was capped at $168,411 as of 2018. The maximum salary for staffers employed by senators was a little bit higher, $169,459. So if you take that figure as to how many staffers they have in the House of Representatives and you put that together with the staffers that they have in the Senate, that's almost $700 million a year in salary just for staffers alone.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. We're running over time here, Melba.
I apologize.
Okay. No, this is very good. Very good. I know you want to talk about state legislators and governors.
Yeah.
You want to? Can you kind of wrap those together a little bit if you can?
Absolutely. So Gallup did a poll in 1994 and 1996, and the question that they asked was, should a president face term limits when Congress doesn't? So really what they were getting at is, should Congress have term limits? And between 2/3 and 3/4 of Americans favored a constitutional amendment to limiting congressional terms. So the first legislative term limits actually took effect in 1996. And as of 2018, we have 15 states that have term limits for their legislators.
Okay. Okay.
Now, gubernatorial term limits, we have 36 states that have term limits under governors. Okay. And so the importance of this is that Gallup asked the same question again in 2013. And this time, about 75% of Americans favored limiting the terms of Congress members. And the importance of this is from our Convention of States and from our group Citizens of Self-Governance, this is one of the issues that we want to take up. And we know that according to Article 5, we would need 3/4 of the states to ratify a proposed amendment to the Constitution. And that's what the 75% gets us.
All right. Melba, thank you very much. Boy,
You're very welcome. I'm sorry I ran over time, but
well, that's okay. It was very interesting.
Looking at more and more information.
You had a wealth of information. You probably had more that we couldn't get to, but so thank you very much, Mel. I see we got someone down here did. Let me get that agenda item off the. There's somebody down here. I don't know if this is somebody you know. Convention of States, Indiana says, "Nice job, Melba." So I'm not sure who that person is, but I thought I would show that to you. So very good, Melba. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very, very much. And you come back again, all right?
I sure will.
All right. Let me send you back down there. Okay. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that very as much as I did. I think Melba did a great job on it, and she had, like we said, she had a wealth of information, and I wish we could have had more time to get into everything, but we had to kind of wrap things up there. So what I'm trying to do here is I want to get into our second segment here, and I wanted to get a full screen for you here. So I think I got it going here. Resources that we have available to us here in Indiana and in many of these nationally. Of course, the main one is our website, conventionofstates.com. And this is a national website. You'll hear us make reference to this website frequently. Now, embedded in the national website is then our state website page, conventionofstates.com/Indiana. That obviously would be a little more focused on the state of Indiana. Social media, we're on various platforms, and the first one would be Facebook. We have a state Facebook page, Convention of States Indiana. As a matter of fact, this broadcast is coming to you this evening through that Facebook page. YouTube channel, COS Indiana. Now, this YouTube channel is very much an educational resource for you as well as our leadership, where we have PowerPoint presentations, recordings of these broadcasts. We also have links to various podcasts. Our legislative liaison, Paul Phillips, does a podcast called The Free to Be Free. Excellent podcast on various topics related to Convention of States. So I would encourage you to check out our YouTube channel and take a look at those. We're on Twitter, #COS Indiana. We're on Instagram, Convention of States Indiana. We are now on LinkedIn. And like I said, social media platforms are out there, and you can find us there. Okay, let me give you just some quick numbers for the state of Indiana. Last year, 2018, we surpassed 30,000 supporters. Been growing tremendous at about a 40% growth rate. So we're We've set a goal for 2019 of 40,000 supporters. We're on track to meet that. Out of those, we have about 2,900 people that have indicated a willingness to volunteer if called upon. Then we have about 40 individuals in leadership roles. Now, this is very important. If you have any desire to get more involved in Convention of States, please go to our website. Here's this website again, conventionofstates.com. Click on the menu selection, Take Action. Scroll down and look at the different volunteer opportunities that we have available. If there's one of interest, open it up, read about it. If you're very interested in it, go ahead and make application. You're not obligated in any way, but what this does is then your name will pop up on a report that I see, as well as a few others, and one of us will be in contact with you to further discuss your area of interest. So we always need leadership, people in leadership. So if you have any interest in that, please go to the website, take a look at the different positions that we have. All right, last segment, Convention of States basics. There are 3 tenets in Convention of States that we follow, and they are the problem, the solution, and the plan. So let's look at each one briefly. The problem. Well, the problem basically is that we think our government is out of control and will not relinquish power. In other words, our government will not address certain basic structural issues in our government. Now, no one political party is responsible for this. Both parties have contributed. This has been going on for decades. This is not just a recent occurrence. It's basically our elected officials lack the will and the courage to address these basic structural issues. Now, we've defined that into 3 major abuses that we see going on by the federal government. The very first one is our national debt. And as you know, this has been in the news again here recently. Our government is not addressing our national debt. Apparently, budget-wise, the spending is going to continue. And so nothing is being done to address our national debt. We're over 22 trillion. We may have hit 23 by now. Unfunded liabilities, I hear numbers like 250 trillion. So this is a problem that needs to be addressed, obviously, for our country. The second major abuse we see has to do with the regulatory crisis. Yes, I know the current administration has been eliminating some regulations, but much more needs to be done, as well as the process by which these regulations are created. So the regulatory crisis is the second abuse. Third abuse has to do with state sovereignty. When the country was founded, it was founded upon the concept of dual federalism, where the states and the federal government would share power. Well, that has tilted all in favor of the federal government. Now, we think, involved in that, of course, power and money, but we think the career politician plays a role in this too. And so this is the third abuse, the area of state sovereignty. Well, what's the solution? This is what we're all about, folks. This is what Convention of States is all about. We think that according to Article 5 of our Constitution, which describes 2 methods of amending the Constitution, we think this is where a Convention of States needs to be held to propose amendments to the Constitution that would address those abuses that we just mentioned. Now, we're not making this up. This is right in Article 5 of our Constitution. As I said, there are 2 methods described here. And let's talk just very briefly about each one. The first method, we're used to this one. We know about this one, where 2/3 of Congress propose amendments to the Constitution. Then any amendment, in order to be ratified, has to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures, which would be 38 states, before that amendment or amendments would become amendments to the Constitution. Well, the second method, again, like I said, is right in Article 5, is where 2/3 of the state legislatures apply to hold a convention of states for the purpose of amending the Constitution. I should say, for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution. Any amendments that would come out of that convention would have to go through the same ratification process as in method 1. So 2/3 of the state legislatures, or 34 states, would make application to hold a convention. Any amendments coming out of that would have to be ratified, meet the ratification requirement of 3/4 or 38 states. That's what we want to see with Convention of States. Our plan's in two parts. The first part is the application strategy. As I said, we need 34 states to make application to hold this convention. Well, the applications all have to be the same. It's called aggregation. And so Convention of States has literally drawn up the application that we want 34 states to sign on to. It's also referred to as the resolution. And in the subject matter of that application, then it's the subject matter that determines the agenda at a convention, I might say. But in that subject matter, we address fiscal restraints, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits. Those are the three areas that we want to see amendments proposed that will address the abuses that we identified by the federal government. Second part of the plan is mobilizing the grassroots. That's you, me, our state legislators, mobilizing the grassroots to make this happen. So we need your help. If, like I said, if you have any desire to get involved, please go to our website and check us out. We have a great deal of momentum going. We have 15 states that have signed on, have passed the resolution, making application to hold the convention. Indiana is one of those states, I might mention. We were the 6th state to do this. We need to get to 34. Now, Convention of States is in all 50 states, so we're all across the country. We've got over 30,000 supporters here in Indiana. We're over 3.9 million nationally. So we're on the move, and we're striving to make this happen. So we welcome you if you have any desire to get involved with us, and I hope you do. All right. Let me get back then, and we'll wrap things up this evening. So let me see if I can identify any people that we may have tuning in this evening. Don't see any that I recognize down there. So hopefully next time we'll have some more people join us. We normally have a few. And let me just mention that our next broadcast, which will be August 12th, a week from tonight, we're going to have another one of our district captains join us, Richard Loken. And Richard's going to be talking about enumerated powers. Very, very interesting topic, and very appropriate when you consider the budget that's being dealt with in Washington, D.C. right now. But very interesting to know just what the Constitution says our government can spend money on. And so Richard's going to talk about enumerated powers. So I think that'll be a very interesting topic for us to get into. All right, let's wrap things up. This is my favorite quote. You've probably heard me say it many times. One of our founders, Mr. Mark Meckler, came up with this quote. And basically he said that, there's a fundamental question facing our country. And that question is not what should we do? The question is who will decide? And I think this says it all. The question facing us is a two-word question, very simply, who decides? Obviously, we believe we, the people, should have a larger say, more control, more say-so in what we do in this country. That's it for tonight, folks. We've gone a few minutes longer than normal, but I hope that's okay with you. So I'll end it there and let you go about the rest of your evening. Please be aware, we'll be back on next Monday evening at 7 o'clock. So please plan on joining us at that time. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.